Hey everyone, my name is Wedge, and once again, it's time for the Manosaurus Tournament Review. The Pro Tour was last weekend, and if you remember this time last year, that was around when Blue Devotion first showed up and became public enemy #1 in Standard. After seeing Obzan and Jeskai decks make strong showings, you might be worried about whether history is going to repeat itself. Well, fear not, we appear to be safe for the moment. While Obzan and Jeskai are certainly the big contenders, there's still room for other decks in Standard. We had two big Standard events this past weekend. Let's start with the top 8 from GP Los Angeles. Winning the day was Daniel Sheed running an updated take on Green-Red monsters. As one might reasonably expect, he had some Crater's Claws and a couple Sarkin the Dragon Speaker added into the mix. He also ran one Ash Cloud Phoenix with an extra on sideboard. We got to see the Phoenix do work as a blocker that you can't just get rid of with a removal spell, in spite of its low toughness. It actually performs surprisingly well. Coming in second place was Denis Ulamov running a surprising deck, Boss Sly. His take on the deck was particularly bossish, running only 17 lands. His curve topped out at 3 for the ever-popular Goblin Rabblemaster. The remaining slots were all tiny creatures and combat tricks with a bit of burn on the side. Cards like Frenzied Goblin and Hammerhand kept the way clear for attackers. Another Boss Sly deck run by Eric P. took third place. He had a similar list, but surprisingly with no Rabblmasters. Instead, he ran tech like Arena Athlete, Hordling Outburst, and Hall of Triumph. Next up is Carlo Faustus in fourth with Obzan Midrange. He had a more mixed set of Planeswalkers than usual. Beyond 3 Sorin, he also had singletons of Nissa Worldwaker, Ajani Mentor of Heroes, and Elspeth Sun's Champion. Interestingly, he also had Fleece Mane Lion, a card we usually see more of in the aggro Obzan builds. Speaking of which, next up in 5th place was Tamada Ryoichi with an Obzan aggro deck. He ran a full playset of On Offensive the Foremost, where most decks only run 3. Also unusually, he fit in a playset of Courser of Crewfix. It worked out pretty well since he only lost one match all day going into the top 8. Brad Nelson finished 6th with Mardu Midrange. His was more creature heavy than Mardu decks we've seen before. To accomplish this, he took out a surprising amount of removal, making room for Seeker of the Way and Hordling Outburst. Isaac Sears finished 7th with Obzan aggro. In fact, his deck was card for card the same 75 that we saw in the Pro Tour top 8 last weekend, so it makes sense that he lost out to one of the Sly decks, a deck that wasn't so heavily played in the Pro Tour. And finishing out the GP top 8 was Christopher Goldsmith with another Obzan midrange deck. This one was somewhat more traditional in that it omitted Nissa and Fleece Mane Lion. Instead, we saw Elvish Mystics and more Ajani and Elspeth. Moving right along, let's pick up with the top 8 from the Star City Open in Worcester. In first place was Trevor Humphreys running Jeskai aggro. Evidently, aggro means you replace Rabblemaster with Brahmaz and one Narset and run Chandra Pyromaster and some Banishing Light, but hey, can't argue with the results, right? Second place went to Dylan Murphy with Boss Sly. His main deck was the same 60 cards as Eric P's deck from the Grand Prix. However, his sideboard deviated a bit, including the addition of a few copies of Peak Eruption. Next up is Andrew Boswell in third with Obzan Midrange. His was a fairly typical Obzan Midrange deck in a similar vein to Christopher Goldsmith's deck from the GP. David Shields took fourth with another Jeskai aggro deck. This one was a bit more similar to the Jeskai tempo decks we've been seeing. However, he did run Stormbreath Dragon and Disdainful Stroke, which we never really saw in the tempo variants. Scott Robbins finished 5th with another Obzan midrange deck. This list had some interesting decisions in it. He was light on walkers with just 2 each of Elspeth and Sorin. This made room for a playset of Ajani's Pridemate, taking advantage of triggers on cards like Siege Rhino and Wingmate Rock to get another huge creature on the table. The synergy was quite effective. He had 4/4 Pridemates on turn 4. A lot. In 6th place, we saw Steven Jack with Green-Black Devotion, a deck we haven't seen since back when Cons first came out a few weeks ago. However, he was a bit lighter on enchantments than usual, and he also added 4 See the Unwritten as another way to spend a ton of Nykthos mana. 7th place went to Elliot Wilczewski with another variation on Obzan midrange. He was a bit light on creatures to make room for a pair of Bile Blight. Other than that, it was pretty much business as usual. And lastly, in 8th place was Andre Batista with Tamer Midrange. This is a deck we haven't really seen before. It reads a bit like Monsters with a lower curve. That lower curve lets him run Ravelmaster and Savage Knuckleblade. The addition of blue also lets him run cards like Kiora the Crashing Wave and Kuranos, God of Storms. That about wraps up our top 8s for this week. If you like the decks we covered today, we'll have deck techs of a few of them out in the coming weeks. You can also join us next week for results from GP Stockholm and the SCG Open in Minneapolis. As always, subscribe below for the latest and most reliable Magic the Gathering information you could ever need. This is the Mana Source, I'm Wedge, thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.